Welcome to the road too. There's been a few things that have happened since last month. We're going to get to them. I've got a panel here. I got the superstars here. Let's meet them. First is Jim Parmalee. In addition to your introduction, I'd like to, what do you call the bailout? The bailout, the rescue? What do you call
Right to the bailout, huh? I'm not sure. Well, Jim Parmalee, I run the Northern Virginia Republican PAC and Republicans United for Tax Relief. And I'm uncomfortable with the bailout. I hope it works. There are a lot of things in there I disagree with.
Just what do you call it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I hope it works, and I hope we get some of our money back from selling the properties in the future,
right.
But I don't know what to call it.
All right, let's go to John Parmalee.
Flannery.
John Flannery.
I know, it's just sort of like looking at those things on the wall. You
It's
just can't
like
shake
a
them.
pair of, go ahead, what do you call it?
Well, I think it started out as only a bailout, and I think that it's also become a consumer protection device. I think what it tried to do is say, we have a critical problem that should never have happened if the Republicans were vigilant and regulated the market when they were in control and didn't resist.
You didn't think Hank Paulson did that, huh?
No, I don't think so. Nor did the SEC chair, who admitted basically he was asleep at the switch while they did whatever they wanted. So the bailout was to, if you will, put liquid into the system.
Liquidity?
Well, I think so. If you think of it as pipes and so forth, and if the water's not running, you hear choking sounds everywhere, and those were the banks that were being compromised and unable to service even savings accounts, but also lending, which is critical to American commerce. The second part of it was to reassure people, the protective part, if you will, and it's more complicated than this, but the second part was to reassure people that if they have accounts in banks, that instead of 100,000 will protect 250,000. And I think that assurance is critical to calm the panic that they were anxious would occur. And we saw the panic on Wall Street. I mean, how do you explain the Dow dropping 777 points in a single day and then recovering the next day just on the promise that we're actually going to resolve this mess? That's a high psychological element, and that's not connected to basic logic or math.
And
then
it dropped again after we passed it. So it's, what are you going to do?
Well, I think what we're going to do, or we're going to fail, is the next step is to deconstruct these loans. Anyhow, I'm a practicing lawyer. I represent the abused and misunderstood. I'm obsessive about politics. I've run for office myself. And I'm very excited about this year's election and the conversation we'll have today about how we're going to restore America by throwing the rascals out.
All right. Wow. We got a lot
Nancy Pelosi.
We got a lot from John. Brian Moran.
Yes. Hi, Jim.
You're
nice to be back with
delegate, right?
I am a
And
delegate.
you might be running for something.
That's right. Right. I
What are you running for?
Look forward to continuing the fiscally responsible positions of Mark Warner and Tim Kaine in Virginia. One of the reasons Virginia is well positioned to withstand this economic crisis is because we've been conservative in our expenditures in the Commonwealth. We're the best managed state in the nation, best state to do business, and we are investing in economic development throughout the Commonwealth so that we'll be able to withstand this economic crisis. I think both Governor Mark Warner and now Governor Tim Kaine have recognized that we need to make sure that we're able to benefit from all of our assets in the Commonwealth, particularly the port and Hampton Roads, as well as the technology and financial centers here in Northern Virginia. So,
as the future governor, perhaps, of the state, the best managed state, what would you call this bailout?
A bitter pill to swallow. And we, for a cure, sometimes you have to swallow the bitter pill. And we hope this will be a cure for a failing economy. I think John has put his finger in it. We've seen 8 years of malfeasance and greed on Wall Street, and an administration that has turned, frankly, a blind eye, allowed it to happen without any intervention, without any regulation.
Yeah.
And it was Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt.
I got a rebuttal later.
Well, he's going to have. John McCain voted for it. John Warner voted for it. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation because both Democrats and Republicans understood that we need to respond to this economic crisis, because though It may be confined to Wall Street now. It will spread to Main Street, and it will prevent business from expanding. Now, I ran a small business, 12 employees. I was fortunate. I never had to borrow to make sure that my employees were paid. But there are many businesses that they're on the edge. They're having to borrow to make sure they make payroll. Now, this crisis would expanded into our small businesses throughout Virginia and certainly throughout America. So this was a bitter pill to swallow. I think it was in response to what unfortunately has been neglect over the last 8 years, and certainly greed and malfeasance on Wall Street, which Americans are rightly angry, very angry. The AIG chief executive last year made $70 million, and he had a failing company. I mean, that is wrong. Americans are rightly angry, but there was no plan B. We had to respond, because otherwise we'd be, frankly, cutting off our nose to spite our face, and we had to respond to this economic crisis. And I think the bailout will do that, we hope.
Good to have you here.
Nice to be with you, Jim.
Mark Herring.
Jim, it's great to be back again.
It's great to have you. You're a state senator.
Yes.
This is not an election year for you, is it?
No, I was reelected last November, and in the Senate it's a 4-year term.
What do you think about the bailout?
Well, I think, like everybody, we're just trying to sort out what's going to be the effect on individuals and families, and how is our local and regional economy going to be impacted. I think with the financial crisis on Wall Street, we don't know yet how far that's going to ripple out, but Loudoun, like Prince William, was one of the foreclosure hotspots. And I got a sense from a lot of people that I was talking to in the real estate community and others that we were beginning to get to the bottom. There was beginning to be some optimism, and just at the point where we felt things were stabilizing in our area, then we have the financial crisis that hit. And so I think families are wondering if businesses have to cut back, if they can't grow and expand, if commercial activity begins to contract, then we're going to see job layoffs and things like that, and then the economy continues to go in a downward direction in the state and local and regional economies. I think that's a great concern for all of us. Additionally, on the government side, revenues are way down, and this is going to be a very tough year for revenue projections are down. There's a projected budget shortfall of $2 billion in the state, and a lot of members are concerned by the time the General Assembly is back in session, it could be going up higher to $3 billion. And that's going to hurt our ability to continue to fund a lot of the services like education and health care.
Well, yes, I agree.
Okay, I got a rebuttal here. Now that I'm outnumbered here, I'm not sure where to start with. But
you want to start? I want to find out who do you support? You support the Nixonian, the Bush thing, the Bush kind of New Deal, as it were.
Well, let me get there are 2 points which both go to finances and the differences between Democrats and Republicans. In the state in Virginia, we have had runaway spending, and during the last session, Republicans said the projections, the economic projections from the Democrats were too high and too optimistic, and that we shouldn't expand spending because next year's revenues were not going to be as high as people thought. Now those chickens are coming home to roost. So it's not really, there's a difference between a deficit and a shortfall. A shortfall is less than what you were hoping to spend. It's not that we have less money, it's that we have less than the Democrats were projecting. And we warned you guys last year not to project such high revenues. And because of that, Democrats kept expanding things beyond where they needed to be expanded.
So the Democrats are to blame in Virginia?
In Virginia, they spent too much money.
Jim would know about deficits because when Jim Gilmore left,
I'm happy you
the
said
governorship,
that.
we had deficits. Mark Warner left surpluses.
You both know, as members of the legislature, that you are not allowed to have a deficit in Virginia. Jim Gilmore,
so
even if Jim Gilmore had wanted to, and he didn't, he could not have had a deficit, and he left money in the rainy day fund. So you could call that a surplus. You guys have been calling it a deficit. It was a surplus. There was more money in the bank on top of a balanced budget, and it was Mark Warner who ended up driving the economy.
You know, Gilmore
poorly.
had the same policies that Wall Street had, that sunk Wall Street, that caused Governor Warner to have to say, on the books, it looks like you've balanced it, let me finish, as is required by our Constitution. But the truth was, it wasn't balanced, and the books were cooked. And that's why there are Republicans supporting Governor Warner running for senator.
Both the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Vince Callahan, a Republican, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, John Chichester,
former.
both Republicans are supporting, well, they were in those positions
Right,
during Mark
but they're
Warner's
not now,
administration.
and I think
they're
that's
both
one of
supporting
the-
Mark Warner because they recognize he was a fiscal leader, and that's the type of leadership Democratic leadership has proposed here in the Commonwealth over the last 7 years, and we've been able to balance the books, maintain our AAA bond rating, which is so vitally important, particularly in these difficult times, and been the best managed state in the country. And
Well, we
that's-
won best managed state under a lot of governors, so that's nothing new. And Jim Gilmore did very well when he was running the state also. So I mean, what you guys have been spinning this for years, and you guys had the advantage of having a Democratic governor after Jim Gilmore, which meant there wasn't a whole lot of defense of Governor Gilmore because the Democrats had to try to make themselves look better by
because he
attacking
left-
the
he le-
previous
he left
guy
the Commonwealth
with money in the
budget in
bank.
such
You left-
shambles.
He left you
Exactly.
guys
We elected a
undeniable.
Democrat.
This is an undeniable fact. Jim Gilmore left the Democrats with money in the bank, money in the rainy day fund. That is an
amazing. Oh,
undeniable
that's
fiscal fact.
That's by law, we have to put so much money into the rainy day fund.
Right, by law, you
And it was
guys
created by
had
Doug Wilder, a
money
Democratic
in.
governor in the
Only
Commonwealth.
Democrats could take money in the bank and pretend it's a deficit. That right there encapsulates, and that also sort of encapsulates the problem we've had in Wall Street with
Well-
Democrats over at Freddie and Fannie,
Is
you know,
this-
mismanaging
this is a
those organizations and
bailouts-
driving the economy into crisis.
Is the bailout a Democratic thing?
Well, it is a bipartisan thing, I'll give you that, and there are bipartisan problems with it. There are also some decent things in it, too. But Nancy Pelosi signed off and pushed this thing through, so lest you blame it all on Republicans, it is a bipartisan thing.
I
But
agree with that.
the economy, it's not all Wall Street, it's a lot Wall Street, it's not all Wall Street, it's also government having stepped in, and government under Democrats, government under Democrat appointees, also mismanagement with Freddie and Fannie that drove us into this. And I think if you let the market work a little bit, a little open, the government interfered in the market. And when you interfere in the market and cause problems, and then interfere back in the market to try to fix them, don't blame the market.
Well, you can blame the market when you have a bunch of greedy people that can't be trusted to regulate themselves.
But you let the market fix it.
No, the market doesn't fix it.
government stepped in-
Reread
the
Adam
government stepped
Smith.
in to push those
Reread
things.
Adam Smith. Adam Smith's notion, which is your Bible,
The invisible
in the
hand.
Wealth of Nations, the invisible hand assumes government intervention, assumes participation by government as a way to create rules within, quote, the market operates freely.
Rules, but the government
You took
stepped
away
in and
all the
pushed
rules.
bad decisions
You
in
took
some
away
cases.
all the rules. Your presidential candidate doesn't believe in rules. The SEC chairman doesn't believe in rules.
No, we don't believe in
Paulson didn't
rules.
believe in
Hold
rules
it.
until the house was burning
There's a
down.
difference
and then
between
we all have to run to
legitimate
put out the
rules
fire.
and the nanny state. That's the difference.
Let's get into some specific concerns. Because
Where we go from here?
What are specific concerns?
Well, the
about
specific
this?
concern would be, one, the perception that we are somehow rewarding bad behavior. I mean, Wall Street has not acted responsibly over the last several years.
didn't
Why
we?
we got into this
Didn't
crisis. And we are rewarding bad behavior. That is a perception and probably a reality problem. That is a
Yeah.
problem. However, get back, what do we do? Paulson, it was reported this morning that Paulson and President Bush's discussion, well, if we can't pass Plan A, what do we do? And Paulson said, we don't have Plan B. This was it. And so
Yeah, Colonel
it
Clink
was,
gave us a 3-page
We were-
memo for $700 billion.
we were backed into a corner on this situation. We should have been vigilant over the last several years. We should not have gotten into this situation. Now, I'll tell you, I've worked a number of jobs in my life, one of which was renovating old houses, fixing them up. And when my brother and I would purchase the house to fix it up, we were required to show that we could pay that mortgage. I mean, it was as American as apple pie and motherhood, that you would have to display the net finances that you could pay the mortgage. To
But Wall
suggest that we
Street-
somehow
yeah.
got into this situation where people were purchasing homes without the ability to pay the mortgage, I mean, that is totally irresponsible. And whether it's Democrat or Republican, it was
enough
a
to go
situation
around
we got into. Well,
both
the local bank would provide a loan, and then these mortgages would go out into the market, and they were traded back and forth without any understanding whether or not
Oversight,
those
yeah.
mortgages were
Oversight.
going to be paid, or oversight, as you call it, right? So that was a terrible situation we got into, and now, now it has permeated throughout the economic crisis because our housing industry is so vitally important. Not all the construction jobs, the value of property, all the variable assets that are building into the house, the wood, the construction, the materials necessary to build houses. I mean, so it permeates throughout our economy, and so it's
affects them directly. People are
your
watching
listeners.
this, and they're
Absolutely.
seeing-
You have a house that's being foreclosed on in your neighborhood, it brings everyone's down.
Yeah,
That's why we
absolutely.
need to now intervene, because folks who were responsible, purchasing homes that they could afford, are now being negatively
Yeah.
impacted, and that's why we have to respond.
We're taping this on October 4th, so it's hard, I didn't read the 470-some page document yet, but I've got to believe there are a lot of things missing in that document, like an arbitrage clause, so that people don't dump all their
Well, I was
bad
pleased to see
holdings on
one
it.
provision was limiting these corporate executives' pay.
Yeah.
Because again, we're rewarding bad behavior, and we should not do that, and we're going to have to put a harness around these folks who are receiving these enormous salaries and not earning them.
Well, I think the other problem with you say it's a long document, but it doesn't answer the following question, which is, how do we deconstruct these aggregate packages that contain bad debt and figure out the value of it in the auctions that are going to happen? All
Yeah.
of which, there's several concepts
a
that are very
pricing
difficult.
clause or something like that.
And they've been hiring physicists and advanced mathematicians prior to this to look at this in the aggregate and to assert a value through algorithmic mathematics.
Sell the
What we-
mortgage-backed securities.
Well, what we're going to have to do is take this big black box and open it up, and they're going to have to, using, God bless the computer, they're going to have to figure out what it is really worth. They're going to have to go down to the detail, and there are ways to do that. Anything else is a guess, and Paulson as much as admitted it. And the second general problem, I think, is that whomever you hire in the government to conduct these auctions should not be the very people that got us into this mess. And
You
they are
think?
the experts, and that is
You
the
think?
problem. Well, I think, and I know, and the question is, will Paulson, who is a creature himself of Wall Street with a $176 million balloon before he went into this job as pay, compensation for himself, can he separate himself to deal with this problem in that way, given the enormous power he requested, which has been somewhat limited?
But
These are
it's
huge
interesting.
questions, and I don't mean to say that they can't be answered, but they can't be ignored.
It's
that's for
interesting
sure.
but you have brought up all of these very difficult things, and I'm not saying, aside from this particular crisis, the market, you're saying you don't want to put power in this person's hands and this person's hands, it's sort of difficult. The market would have done all of those things.
Well, why didn't the invisible hand protect us from
You know
this
why?
problem if it was so good?
Because
The
the
market
government
wouldn't
put
have
its
done all
foot.
those
The
things.
government
No.
put its
The market
foot
wouldn't have
on
done
the
all those
market,
things.
and the market was restrained originally, and in some cases accurately, in some cases inaccurately, by
fallacy
the
of a
government,
free-
which caused the problem in the first
The
place.
fallacy of a free market as an idealized system is the presumption that there is complete information and truth.
That's what you have to
Let
have.
me finish.
I'll concur with
Let me
that. I'll
finish.
have to concur. You need
and the
that.
failure of this market is not to regulate those who offered things that did not make financial sense, that is, liar paper in which people represented that, unlike the good experience of others who got mortgages, they represented, oh, I can pay it, and that was enough, and they get 0%, they put nothing down, and it collapses, and why don't they care? Because I'm passing it on to someone, and
Exactly.
ultimately Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac is going to insulate me, and so this is a great system.
But
Well,
should they
and
have?
it broke down.
Should they have, to the extent that they
Well,
did?
that was the free
And-
market
and-
you're
no,
talking about.
no. Fannie and Freddie are not the free market. You can make a case for those organizations that they may be necessary for certain loans, but the question is, where's the balance,
Well,
and how far off balance
Where is
did
the
they
balance?
get?
Where
And
is
when
the
they got
balance?
off balance, the entire market tumbled.
Where is the balance?
That's where you got to find the right balance, and they clearly didn't.
Wait a minute.
They clearly didn't.
The Republicans, the Democrats,
Well,
both
the Democratic
both houses
appointees
of
were
Congress,
Democrats were generally in charge
both
of this.
of them are guilty of this.
There are some Republicans too, yes, but the folks that were mainly in charge of these institutions that pushed us over the edge, so to speak, were Democrats. And if they had kept the right balance, and it's difficult.
The blame game is not the way to address
Well, you
this
guys have been
problem.
blaming George Bush,
Well,
and he wasn't in charge of any of those things.
Well, if we're going to go forward and talk about the solution, we have a problem. And first of all, we don't have a free market because lying is not a premise of a free market. Secondly, when Hamilton was putting together the Constitution that provided for this government, he did not contemplate a free market. He talked about a bank, and he talked about a system of rules and regulations that may have been primitive as compared to the modern market. So there is not now, not worldwide, and maybe never in our entire recorded history been a free market in America since there was a freer market is not a quote free market. You can't use an idealized system to predict economic behavior when it doesn't exist except in your mind.
Yeah.
No, we do it every day.
I want to go to Mark. The people you represent, what are their specific concerns?
Well, again, the specific concerns are mostly two areas.
And let's see if we can translate them into what should be in this the document.
Okay. The concern, one major concern is this going to even work? And if the economy continues to falter, what's going to be the impact on their families, on the communities in the area? So is it going to work? And is it going to stabilize the market and provide for the liquidity so that we can have commercial expansion in the future? And again, another concern is these are a lot of the people who are getting bailed out are people who had benefited from this system, and is that fair, and when is it going to end? So those, I think, are two of the general concerns that people have in the community.
They're not optimistic about this, are they?
Well, I think we're all concerned, but I think there was a feeling that it was important for Congress to act. It was important for Congress to restore some liquidity in the markets, because it didn't seem like it was correcting itself, or if it was a correction, it was going to continue and go down and hurt even more all across the country, and it would permeate way beyond just Wall Street and hit everybody in a real negative way. So I think people wanted some action, want to restore confidence in the markets so that we can have ordinary commercial activity again, and that was something I think was important.
Did you ever read Naomi Klein, the shock doctrine?
No.
No?
Well, basically, the principle is
disaster capitalism.
Yeah, well, there are several writings that have the following principle. If I terrorize you, we have 9/11. I terrorize you, then I can pass a Patriot Act, because I have you so afraid that I just call it a Patriot Act, and without reading it, it was this case in the Congress, 435 people, there were only 2 copies on the floor of the House. They passed it because it was called the Patriot Act. Yeah. And they substituted a version that had been agreed upon universally by the Judiciary Committee. So her doctrine is this is a calculated political misconduct strategy by which you achieve what you want as a minority by scaring the hell out of the population. And the same was true of the Iraq War. We get you to pass a resolution to give authority, and then we abuse it. And so the third prong of that in her book is that, or applying that book, would be that the current dilemma is I give you a 3-page memo, I scare the living daylights out of you,
exactly.
and then we're in charge.
How can anybody give a 3-page memo?
Well, it's apparent. Well, I think
from a $700 billion bailout.
With his background, you would assume that you wouldn't see anything less than a 100-page document.
Think?
But I think that, and I'm very concerned about where his starting point was, making himself a czar, not subject to review by anyone,
to anybody,
and not elected, and appointed by a guy who already drove the car into the wall, meaning Mr. Bush.
And I think another thing that people are concerned about is making sure that this doesn't happen again. I mean, first you need to stop the hemorrhage. Okay, assuming we're able to stop the hemorrhage, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And I think this notion that all regulation is bad, either no oversight or lax oversight, is all that's needed at best in some of these new financial instruments. That's the kind of mentality and philosophy that I think led to this, and I'm hopeful that it will. People are beginning to say, "Hey, wait a minute." There are times and there are occasions when regulations can be helpful to the markets, and we need to make sure that we have people who understand these and are not going to be have their hands tied behind their back by a philosophy that says all regulation is bad, all oversight
And I hope
is bad.
people realize that the philosophy that says the government should be involved in all aspects of our life also realize that when government gets
Yeah,
terribly
I don't
involved in
think
the
that's-
economy,
that's
That's
things-
not what people are
things-
saying.
things
That's
like-
not what people are
things-
saying.
That's exactly what's happening
I don't
here.
think so.
Government's involvement, over-involvement in the economy in a risky manner is in large part what drove people to this. People took risks they shouldn't take because the government assisted them in taking risks they shouldn't take.
Yes.
And now we, the taxpayers, are paying for that. And I think you want to encourage things to help people, but when government steps in too far and makes too many mistakes, that was the key part. When government made too many mistakes on this, and it was government pushed by Democrats, there were some Republicans too. That's what drove this over the brink.
You know, it's like at the Republican convention. You'd
wait a
think
minute.
you
We
weren't
gotta-
in charge for the last.
No, we weren't in charge of Freddie nor Fannie.
We're going to be right back. Obviously, I got a job here. We'll be right back.
September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember,
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation,
Under God.
Indivisible.
with liberty.
And justice.
For all.
in America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield, but nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, wake up. It's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of
I work 6 days a week.
Who
do you think you
Stand
are?
up straight. Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
What kind of man are you?
I'm a father.
Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schmasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids. I swear.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy. Hi, Dad.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. Precious places. Timeless places. Places that, with your help, can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
Welcome back. Well, I want to switch topics. I'm gassed out on that thing.
Bailed out.
Yeah.
We're going to bail out of that topic.
Let's talk a little bit about the debates. We'll talk about the Obama-McCain debate first. What are your general reactions to it?
I think, for starters, I think it's similar to Kennedy-Nixon in a certain way. I mean, it's very difficult to make comparisons, but I think it's helpful to make this one. Before that debate between Nixon and Kennedy, the question was Kennedy inexperienced and so forth, despite his resume? And the fact that they stood side by side, that alone, and Kennedy not only held his own, those who saw it thought that he might be superior for a number of reasons that were cosmetic. There's an emotional decision. In this case, we saw McCain stand there right after he was going to ride to the rescue on the bailout. And he appears, in my opinion, to have been impetuous given the pirouette of acts that he did beforehand. And then you have the calm and cool and assured presence of Obama. And I just think the physical tableau of the two of them standing there by itself reassured America. And no one, I guess, can tell us for sure, even with statistics. But the difference in the polls after the election, after that debate, sort of confirmed that the general agreement was that. Now, you could argue about debating points and who made different points and so forth. But I think you came away from the program saying, whatever McCain says, he seems to spin in the wind, despite the fact that Palin likes to put her finger in the air and say it's Obama. And I think that you can't fool the public. He's the one who's spinning in the wind. He's the one who's desperate. He's the one who's lathered about and one day has no plan, and the next day has a commission, and then he has the plan and wonders why Obama doesn't have his plan, and Obama's the one making overtures to him to solve the mess. The economy has also helped those arguments resonate in that debate between the two of them.
Yeah, the economy tanks at the wrong moment.
It is the economy
for
stupid.
McCain.
Yeah.
What was McCain trying to do with the suspending the campaign?
He's trying to help solve a problem. I know this might be amazing to Democrats, but the man was, the man suspended his campaign while Obama kept campaigning, and I think that shows a crucial difference between the two. One is all about action. The other is mainly about speeches and platitudes. And I still would like to know, what Senator Obama really would do if he were president. Sure, he would give good speeches. Sure, he seems very friendly, but he seems to be sort of
specific.
Right, and you're basically saying that you think he won the debate because he was able to stand on a stage with Senator McCain and not look out of place. That is a very low bar for someone who wants to be leader of the free world.
You who have Sarah Palin stuff.
Sarah Palin did a wonderful job.
Jim, what happened, John McCain suspending his campaign, I don't think anyone agrees or thinks that helped. What it did is interject presidential politics in what were very difficult negotiations in a very serious issue with the economy and the economic recovery. So, him suspending it, he tried to he tried to throw another Hail Mary. Frankly,
I think that's right.
He's thrown several, and you only get a couple a game. If they're typically not successful, he threw one with Sarah Palin, the suspending the campaign. It just interjected political. And it's so partisan. It's so partisan on this presidential election that wasn't what we needed, and it didn't help. He came in. He didn't save the day. The Republicans killed the bill on the first vote. Now it subsequently passed, but in the first vote, when he supposedly was there to help, it failed. So he didn't help.
But by the Republicans standing up on that, they did get a better bill. Now, whether it was a good bill or not, but it was a better bill than it was before. So the Republicans did a service.
That's
did a
right.
good service.
The Republicans forced a better bill.
I don't know that the
Senate
Republicans did. The Senate forced.
The Senate.
Yeah, the adults passed the bill.
There were Republicans in the Senate last time I looked.
Well, we have a similar problem here in Virginia. We have adult Republicans in the Senate, and we have children in the House. Something
I see.
On the Republican
we're all
side.
too familiar with it.
Well, we're talking about the Republicans.
On the debate, though, in Barack Obama, that debate was supposed to have been about foreign policy, which is Barack Obama's perceived weakness.
Yeah.
What happened in that debate, I think John McCain actually did fairly well. He appeared vigorous and aggressive.
I did too.
He didn't look at Barack Obama. There was some stylistic points that I think he lost because he appeared arrogant or overly, pugnacious maybe toward his opponent. But Barack Obama did more than just meet the low bar. He excelled. I mean, he was obviously very knowledgeable. He was strong. He spoke with authority on foreign policy, which is a very, very important issue with Iran and, of course, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is a very important issue. Americans are looking for someone who can lead us in this global economy as well as homeland security and national defense. And I think they're right in looking to see if Barack Obama has what it takes. On that stage, he showed he has what it takes.
And a lot of times, the night of a debate and the day after, and we're all familiar with the answers and exactly what happened. But over the course of time, a candidate's specific answer to a specific question kind of fades a little bit, and it becomes blended into a general impression of the candidates. And I think it's true of the vice presidential debate as well as the presidential. In my sense is that it showed that McCain was impulsive, whether you put it in the context of the vice presidential selection that he made, whether it was the sudden suspension of the campaign, and then when he realized that what really wasn't helpful, then all of a sudden, okay, it's back on, and I will go to the debate. I think the feeling is, including how he debated that night, I think it kind of fits into a general feeling that he's impulsive, and Obama came across as confident, knowledgeable, assured, and that's fitting again with my sense of where things are in the campaign, and I think that was true also of the vice presidential debate.
You're basically saying wandering around doing nothing is this year's Democratic example.
Well,
of leadership.
that's not
rather
fair
than,
at all.
rather than going to Washington to try to solve a crucial problem.
He didn't try to solve a problem. He tried to solve his campaign's problem.
Well, that's ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous, because he knew the Palin interview was coming out that very evening that he, quote, said he was suspending his campaign when he did nothing of the sort. His ads ran. No, he made political appearances at Clinton's affair in New York. He gave an interview to CBS that evening
on the economy, which is what
he
was suspending his campaign to do.
He hoped ridiculously that it would trump the Palin interview that ran with Cork that same evening.
Oh, that's a stretch.
And he can't. That is absolute. These are facts. And then he canceled appearing on Letterman, never thinking Letterman would get the tape of him crimping his hair when he was supposedly taking a plane.
For the economic interview, yes.
And when he went to D.C., you know who he met with? Not the senators. He met with the rump group of Republicans
who made the bill better.
That broke the deal and dropped the market.
And
we
made
couldn't have
the
known
bill
when he
better.
did it.
And made the bill better.
The Senate made the bill better, if you want to be fair about it.
The Senate had to react to what the House Republicans did.
No, the Senate didn't react.
It wasn't going to pass without what it wasn't going to pass.
The Senate acted when the House couldn't because of the rump group that you align yourself with of radicals in the House that decided it was more important to stand for silly principles that didn't solve the problem. Yes, silly principles. That is to say, under no circumstance do we ever spend taxpayers' money for anything except what? War, even when it's built on a lie.
We spent plenty of taxpayers' money. We spent a whole bunch of taxpayers' money.
We're borrowing our money.
We're borrowing it from China, which years ago would have been
George Bush asked us to sacrifice nothing to take on the war in an act of patriotism.
Credit card economy.
Other than sacrificing lives of our men and women fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wall Street approach to running international affairs too, isn't it?
Well, I'm sorry, Jim. We were having a side, but
Brian and I were talking. Did you make a point?
These guys always want to.
George Bush asked us not to sacrifice. He's asked our men and women in service to sacrifice, but he has not, frankly, asked Americans to sacrifice financially to pay for his war. We continue to borrow money from China and to finance this war.
Well, if you guys, want to talk about Iraq, we can talk about the surge again, which Senator McCain led on. Senator McCain was right on, and Senator
there was another one of your Hail Marys. That Hail Mary on the surge,
well, I'll tell you what,
might have been successful.
You can call whatever you want, but if it was a Hail Mary,
this war started in 2002.
Well.
We wouldn't have lost thousands of lives or spent $10 billion a month if Barack Obama was in charge and showed judgment and not gone into Iraq in the first place.
You guys had talked about bipartisanship earlier. Let's not forget that Democrats overwhelmingly voted for the war because they voted for the war, and that was a bipartisan move. So don't try to blame.
That there are weapons of mass destruction.
I'm outnumbered here, Jim. So this is why I have to jump in a little bit to spread the truth here.
I give you a lot because you're outnumbered. But
fact checking.
What was the purpose of the Iraq War?
The purpose of the Iraq War is because we're involved in a worldwide war on terror, and because Iraq had violated UN resolutions repeatedly, had violated the terms of the original truce of the original war, and we went in there, and the Democrats backed it up. Bill Clinton, out of office, backed it up. Everyone looked at the same intelligence pretty much and backed it up. And yes, some things have gone wrong throughout it, but you don't go back and say, well, I never voted for it, when they did vote for it. The question is, where do we go from here? And Senator McCain, again, breaking from the pack, pushed the surge, risked his campaign on the surge, and was right. He was right. I want a president who has that sort of judgment.
They're trying
he did
to
the
code
right
over
thing.
this. What this election is about judgment.
Right.
And what
McCain has great
and
judgment.
as Mark perfectly put on, this impulsive behavior by John McCain.
It wasn't impulsive. That was risking his campaign for
the original judgment to go into Iraq and supporting George Bush.
Did Hillary Clinton risk her campaign too? I mean,
but it's Barack Obama who is the nominee.
He didn't have any
He is the one who's
responsibility.
going to
And
be
one of
on
the
the
reasons
ballot.
Barack Obama is our candidate is because he displayed that judgment.
Well, hold it. Should we just
opposing
nominate only people who were responsibility free at the times of national crisis? No, of course not. He didn't have a vote on that.
Responsibility free. It's the correctness of the decision.
He did not have a vote. The Democrats in the Senate, the Democrats supported this, and they did the right thing in a moment of national unity.
Did you read Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine?
I did not read the book.
Yeah, you should read that.
Jim and I are the only two that read these kinds of things.
Well, I am reading Tom Friedman's Hot, Flat, and Crowded.
Great.
And I suggested to your viewers, that is energy and the environment. I mean, we have to get around this issue immediately. Energy technology,
Terrific book. Yeah.
Terrific book. It's chilling. We need to respond. I know Mark and I will be responding with Governor Kane's leadership right here in Virginia. There are things we need to start doing yesterday to respond to this crisis.
What are some of those things?
Conservation, for one. I mean, there are essentially 5 energy sources, many of which produce carbon emissions that are polluting the Earth's atmosphere. Conservation does not. Conservation can be an energy source. We must reduce our energy consumption. And then, secondly, we need to pursue clean alternative energy sources. And this can create green jobs. It can be good for our economy. It can reduce our dependence on foreign oil. And it can ensure better national defense so that we don't have to go into countries to defend oil reserves and preserve our oil consumption. So alternative clean energy, we must pursue and must pursue it diligently. And we must do a better job conserving energy consumption.
And I think some of the low-hanging fruit in this area is really energy efficiency. A lot of our homes and buildings could be made a lot more efficient, and I think that's really a lot of low-hanging fruit. And I think we need to look at ways, what can we do to try and help people make their homes more energy efficient?
We need to pursue green buildings, which do not use as much energy consumption. Must retrofit some of the buildings we now have. And I think in our fleets, our municipal fleets, buses and vehicles, we must use more fuel-efficient vehicles.
And what's interesting is
how
quickly, if I may toss in a support of the market again, the free market has jumped in with raising prices to push people toward more green activities than ever before.
We just provide $25 billion in loans to our automobile industry to build vehicles we desperately want and demand. So has the market responded? The government's having to give them the money to produce the vehicles we've demanded for years?
Actually, because there's a waiting list, I'm not sure those
Why
loans
are they still
were needed.
producing trucks and SUVs?
If I could add about that new and improved bill you were talking about, it
what
includes
has happened to the auto industry because of that. The market will correct those things because people will realize that the Hummers
and in the
of those cars are
meantime,
not.
we continue to produce carbon emissions and we suffer from global warming.
The market moves in many cases quicker than the government does, and the government is lagging behind.
Market's strange because GM has had an electric vehicle for about 5 years.
And now now people are interested because of the market. Yeah. The government wasn't able to convince people to be interested.
They plowed them under. Every single one of their original prototype electrical vehicles, they destroyed.
Well, there are good examples of, we have American companies, BP Solar is one, that has alternative energy sources, and do you know where they sell them? Abroad.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the incentive programs are in Europe. They're not here. And this may not be economic in the short term, but the combination of technology and investment now in wind and solar, in addition to conservation measures, is the future. And those people who voted, as McCain did, against investing in these alternative energy sources have delayed our ability to be competitive in the world and compromised our security.
That's not accurate. We can support these things
in
without.
his ad.
Yes, that's right.
He voted against it.
Well, you see, but that's the problem. They count on, politicians generally, not anybody present, of course.
I was say I'm surrounded by politicians here.
They, McCain specifically, presumes voters are not going to do research and not going to know what happened before. Luckily, when politicians say these things 30 days out, there's an opportunity to disinfect the misrepresentations. And I think that's been another failing besides the economy of the McCain campaign. In his desperation to say what's necessary, and we're about to have a whole season of sleaze, if I can believe the newspapers, in which we're going
of sleaze.
A season of sleaze. McCain is so desperate he's going to run all these negative ads that, do you know who I saw Obama with? As opposed to the fact that he had his hand in Keating's
have you
pocket
not
and
seen
Keating
all
had
of
his
the
hands in
negative
pocket.
Obama ads that have been flooding the airwaves? Have you maybe a filter on your television for those?
Well, maybe you need a filter in the season, but
I don't think Americans are going to respond to the negative. We have some serious challenges in energy, in conservation, global warming.
And John McCain is exactly the type of guy that you Democrats used to love because he stood out from his party on all of those things. When did you all fall out of love with John McCain?
He stood out on immigration, which you probably disagree with him on. But he hasn't stood out on energy. He hasn't stood out on the environment. He hasn't stood out.
Actually, he has stood out on the environment.
He opposed drilling in the INWA, which he disagrees with his vice presidential candidate. But he hasn't stood out on the economy, middle class, tax cuts. He's now supporting continuing Bush's tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, as opposed to infusing the middle class, empowering the middle class, because it's been the middle class that has made America great. They're the ones that purchase our homes and our automobiles and work hard every day.
And the middle class, we're the ones who get hammered by government's big taxes. The middle class are the ones that get hammered because the rich can find ways to hide their money, and the poor, because unfortunately they don't have as much money, don't pay as much in taxes, which is fine because they don't have as much money. But the middle class
tax cut.
Why do you
John
rob
McCain
banks?
wants to
Because
continue Bush's legacy of tax cuts for the ultra wealthy.
People see
somehow it'll trickle down. It hasn't trickled down.
One thing, the guy said, the bank robber said, why did you rob banks? I robbed banks because that's where the money is. Where do taxes hit? The middle class, because that is where the money is. That is where the broad base of people are, and that's why they raise taxes on people.
All right, let's go back to
There's a tremendous disparity in economic wealth right now. Let me just tell you, John D. Rockefeller in 1894 made $1.3 million. A lot of money. John D. Rockefeller. That was 7,000 times the average American worker. Last year, a hedge fund manager in New York made $1.7 billion. That was 33,000 times the average American worker. This is unprecedented in American history. We have had such a disparity between the ultra-wealthy and the average American worker. There's a disparity of income. It is hurting America's standing. We must now address the middle-class woes in America, and that's what Obama is trying to do.
But if I may extend the analogy about the banks, though, the rich already pay a huge percentage of the percentage of the taxes because, which is why it's hard to continue to raise those taxes.
Please.
Okay.
Brian. There's just
3 to 1.
Minutes left.
All right.
I want to talk to you.
We haven't had anything to talk about this morning.
You're running for governor, right?
Yes.
And you're going to take Virginia and make it a different kind of state.
No, not really. No, I think Virginia is on a right course, and we must keep it on that course. Energy for the future is something that I am passionate about. We must preserve our environment. I have 2 young children. We must be stewards of our environment. And it can be a win-win because it can generate economic jobs and more green jobs. It can reduce our dependence on foreign oil, so it's a good thing for our military and our young men and women who are fighting overseas. I think it's a win-win. That is a passion of mine. I think I will pursue it. But I'm very bullish on Virginia. We're suffering from a crisis right now, a budget shortfall because America is. But we've had great Democratic leadership, Mark Warner, Tim Kaine. I want to continue that legacy. Smart investments in core services like education, children's health care, economic development, so that all of Virginia can realize their potential, their God-given potential and opportunity. And that's the type of Virginia I see, that's the type of vision that I have for Virginia, and I'm going to do my very best to achieve that vision.
All right. Very good.
Hard to top that.
Yeah.
Well, I could respond if you.
I had Jim Parmalee speechless for a moment.
I just wanted to
Did I
make
have
sure.
you speechless?
I wanted to make sure all my Democratic friends here had plenty of time before I come in with my response.
I want one more. Who are you running against?
I don't know who I'm running against.
There are more of them by the day.
The Republican, no doubt, will be the Attorney General, and I relish running against Mr. McDonnell. We've had our differences over the years in the legislature. I think he has an entirely different vision for Virginia than I do, and I look forward to taking that debate to Virginia.
Well, let me. And we have this Democratic primary too, which will be an interesting to see how you all differentiate yourselves on the issues. And it seems that more and more candidates are thinking about running for it. But if you look at Virginia, I think that it's interesting that now, because of the overinflated predictions of the Democrats in terms of what they could spend, we are now looking at a huge shortfall, which is what Mark Warner has been complaining so much about, the shortfall that he didn't really have. So if Tim Kaine, if you become governor, and if Tim Kaine leaves you with a huge shortfall, will you be bashing him across the state on a shortfall?
Interestingly enough, when Mark Warner came in 2001, I was at that time elected by my peers as a Democratic leader in the House, and Mark restrained himself. There were many Democrats encouraging Mark to say, Jim Gilmore left you in such a maze. Talk about it. Mark didn't do that. He recognized that we must work in a bipartisan manner, and being hyper-partisan about Jim Gilmore at that time would not help.
But he pushed that tax increase within days.
No, he didn't.
It was right away. He started talking about
January 2002, he was sworn in as our governor.
And he immediately started talking about tax increases.
We didn't. 2004, we made the largest investment in education, opposed by Bob McDonnell, who will be my Republican nominee. Smart investments in education, so our young people can reach their God-given potential. That's the type of Virginia I see, and that was not what Mark Warner reached out in a bipartisan way, reached across the aisle. 17 courageous House Republicans joined him. John Chichester,
courageous
a
is
Republican.
one word for it.
What would you call them?
I would call them folks who in many cases broke their pledges not to raise taxes, and Republicans who did not buckle down and look at the budget like an average family does and decide what you can and can't afford.
I have an average family. I run a business. I have 2 young children in our public schools in Alexandria. I'm very proud of my vote in 2004 to make sure that we balanced our budget and made a key investment in public education.
But if you run out of money for your family,
safety.
if you run out of money for your family, you can't unilaterally raise taxes on me to pay the expenses of your family. And what the government did was they went to the middle class and took money out of the middle class because the government would not sit down and recalibrate what it is they decided they needed to spend money on.
I'm conservative in my finances. You know what? I make investments in things that I know will pay off in the long run, like education for my children, and I also put away enough money in a rainy day fund, which we've been able to do under Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, so that when times are tough, I have money to repair my roof or make sure I can cut the tree that just fell in my backyard because of the storms we've been having. That's the type of fiscal responsibility that Virginia families have been doing. That's why Democrats have been doing well in Virginia, because we've been paying attention to those kitchen table issues.
Well, you guys have been sounding like Republicans. That's why you've been doing well.
The issues Virginia families have to talk about is how am I going to provide health care to my children?
Well, this year, what do you do?
We enroll 98% of all eligible children in health insurance.
This year, votes will come up in the General Assembly. What do you do about this shortfall? Raise taxes or not? Yes or no?
I don't think we'll be raising taxes, no. I mean, this isn't a time to raise taxes. What we're going to have to do is cut back on spending, just like Virginian families are having to do.
Sounding like a Republican. How about you?
No, I think I'm sounding like someone who is fiscally responsible.
Not sounding like Mark Warner or Tim Kaine.
No, that's exactly what Mark Warner did. When
I'm sorry, you're right. That's how they sounded during the campaign. It's when they became governor that's when they stopped sounding like that.
Mark Warner cut back on government spending when he took over after Jim Gilmore
the budget ballooned. The budget ballooned. He raised taxes dramatically. The budget has doubled in about the last, 8 years? The budget has doubled.
You all love to say that. You know where it's gone? Corrections. We're building 5 new prisons in Virginia.
But not all corrections, and it's not all. There's a lot of
car tax relief, $1 billion in car tax relief.
That was a tax cut. It was a tax cut.
It's coming out of the
And
state
you guys-
treasury, is
and
it
you
not? No,
gu-
see,
yes,
isn't it
I
coming out
know,
of the state
and you've
treasury?
capped it.
Okay.
Would you rather have the money in
Let's
your
be honest
pocket
with
or
you,
in
we're
another
taking
project?
$1 billion out of the state
It's, no,
treasury.
no,
to
it
get
was
back to
capped
the
a
tax.
while ago, so that's not really responsible for the doubling.
It's $1 billion.
It was capped
Corrections,
years ago.
education, which, do you want to cut education? Oh, I think
well, you don't have to cut education to balance the
don't want to
budget.
cut education.
You don't have
do you
to
want
do
to cut
that.
higher education?
Well, hold it. I'm not talking
that's where
about cutting.
That's where the money goes, in healthcare. Those are the 5 expenditures.
Double
What do you want to cut? Do you want to cut back on corrections?
Your income
Don't you want to talk about being
double.
tough on crime? You want more prisons?
guys take
Do you
all
want to
these
cut back on
items that are
car
not-
tax? Do you want to repeal the car tax?
My
Do you want to
goodness.
cut back on education? You
So
want to tell our
every
teachers?
single
Just surrender.
You
Wave
want
the
to tell our
white
teachers
flag.
they're
You're
getting
nowhere.
paid too much?
I'm just going to get my wallet out and give
All
it
right,
to
we got
Brian
a
now. You
minute.
can
We
spend
got
it
a
all.
minute left. We got a minute left.
That's what Virginia families care about. They want to
Brian?
make sure that neighborhoods are safe, their kids are getting
As
a
do
good
I. As
education,
do I.
and they have a job.
Ryan, we got a minute left. I want to go around the horn here and tell me what will really determine the election.
I think that putting aside party, what the public's reacting to are results. I think that was, it was Warner, it was Kane, it'll be this gentleman right here.
You're talking about the national election?
National.
In the national election, I think people want to change in direction of the country, and they're fed up and tired of how the Bush administration has done things, and they want change, and Barack Obama will bring it.
Yeah, I think people see John McCain as a continuation of the failed Bush administration, plus his impulsiveness. I think people are a little concerned right now. These are dangerous times, and we need somebody with steady, cool leadership.
These are dangerous times, and you need a leader who does what's right for his country, someone who's fought for his country well, who's served for his country, and who knows what to do, and that leader is John McCain.
Thank you. We'll see you again next time.